oxygen, because when things work, when there's proper order in the environment and all that, as a normal human being, you have a right to expect that. But when you encounter chaos and some of what we live with around us, then you might see that, look, there is a whole lot wrong, a whole lot that can be done better. So World Architecture Day is a day all over the world for the work architects to be highlighted, celebrated, better appreciated.
Talking about better appreciation for the work that you do as architects and the world, why do you think at a time such as this it's so important, especially for a climb in Nigeria? You would find that we obviously hold certain peculiarities, for us as a people and as a society, as an environment, as it were. Why do you think this is such an important conversation to be having right now in Nigeria?
I think it's undeniable that one of the core goals of any government or set of people, whether in authority or not in authority, is to progressively improve life. That cannot be done in a vacuum. You have to be somewhere and you have to have a certain baseline from where you aim to improve wherever your targets are. And those are very properly articulated through the work of architecture. But architecture too is much more than just the buildings in which we live, work and play. Architecture also has the ability to encapsulate the cultural environment of a people. That's why there are certain pictures you'll see and you immediately know where that is. There are buildings you'll see taken from some palaces in Japan. You immediately know because of a certain twist of the roof at the edge. There are certain pictures you say that's either Rome or Greece, just because of how the buildings look. There are imitations of such buildings in other parts of the world, but you immediately say that is an imitation of a building from XYZ.
Right.
And so architecture is also an economic driver. You see, when architects work, it's never for ourselves. I mean, okay, for your own property perhaps, but in general, over the course of a lifetime, the majority of the work you do as an architect is for other people. First for your clients and for those who will use the product for the client, either their family or if it's a commercial or institutional building, the visitors or the students or whatever that might be. So architecture is very outward looking, but in itself, it must incorporate the needs, the functions, the attitude of the people, and in some cases even help guide that attitude in a better direction. You see, I don't know whether you've ever experienced this, but if I've observed this, if some people are walking in a certain kind of environment and there's a tiny pile of rubbish on the side, as they're walking past, they might just throw away their banana peel or chewing gum wrapper. But if an environment is immaculate, you would really have to be quite a different kind of person to be the initiator of damaging that environment. Now, how do we keep an environment looking pristine? This year's theme of World Architecture Day is Cleaner Cities for a Healthy Life. I thought that was particularly relevant in the context of Port Harcourt. We have seen over the years the efforts assorted governments and administrations are trying to make to improve how this city is perceived. Long ago, this city was called the Garden City. Some people have called it now the Garbage City. Both G's, both nice short, but it's unfortunate. We must recover to the reputation of the Garden City. And there are many ways to do that. A garden is a place where productivity is pronounced. Apart from the greening of the environment, with the whole global warming and all that we're seeing and experiencing in our climate, a place like Port Harcourt could become a beautiful laboratory, a source of information, a contact point for every other part of Nigeria, even Africa, on how best to green a city. Because fortunately, there's already the Garden City moniker associated with this town. But on the larger scale, World Architecture Day also talks about how the professionals work in teams. It's called World Architecture Day, but every wise architect knows that your work can never be successful unless you're working hand in hand, intimately, with all the other professionals and stakeholders in the built environment. And let me list a few of them. The obvious ones are the engineers and cost economists, are quantity surveyors. But even before you start, if you're not working with your land surveyor to actually identify where your project is, if you're not working with your lawyers who will ensure that you have proper access and title to the land, if you're not working with your geotechnical specialists who will investigate what lies underneath that surface to determine what you can put on top, if you're not working with approving authorities who, have the authority to ensure that what you propose to put there is appropriate and will serve a longer strategic purpose, if you're not working with communities to ensure that your project in the long term will be adding value to that area, then architecture itself cannot stand. You see, that is underscoring how much of an outward-looking profession architecture is. It's not insular. A piece of art can exist for its own self, for its own beauty, and be appreciated strictly for itself. And that's a nice thing. But architecture is at once art and science for people and their purposes.
So, part of the program, would like that you call in and ask whatever questions that you might have. Already 21 minutes gone past you. I can't even believe it, how time flies, but we'd like that you join the conversation. The numbers to call are 0817-923-0002, 0817-923-0003. You can also call 0817-923-0007 or 0817-923-0009. The WhatsApp number is 0809-030-6416. Can we take calls?
Absolutely.
All right. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Yes, good afternoon. You're welcome. Oh dear. Please call back if you can. Now, still talking about, when you mentioned the Garden City and what it has become, it made me, what some people have made it become. It made me think about a lot of realities that we're experiencing right now. But I'll hold that thought so we can take this call. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Please turn off your radio. Are you there?
Hello.
You need to turn off your radio.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Hello. Good afternoon.
You're welcome. Go ahead.
Please, I just want to ask two questions. Right now, the building we're staying, anytime there is, it is so damp. The walls are damp, wet. I don't know where the water is coming from, and all the building, the painting, everything is damp. I just want to ask if somebody can rectify it.
All right. Thank you very much for your question.
There are certainly solutions for that problem. The first thing would be to determine where that water is coming from. Like you say, you haven't been able to perceive it. Sometimes water comes from above. There could be leaks in the roof, and the spot where the leak is actually happening may not be the spot where the water is entering the walls, or the water could be coming from the ground. And in proper construction, I think we'll make a topic of common construction mistakes that people make, but sometimes when people build, they don't put an essential part of construction in, especially in this part of the world, called a damp-proof membrane. So water is amazingly tenacious. It climbs up by capillary action. So you might have water in the ground and it's climbing up in the walls, and if it doesn't have that barrier to stop it from climbing, it actually will climb up. And especially in our climate, where you must notice in recent times there has been so much more rain because of global warming and all that. There's much more water in the water table underground. We might not see it, but the water table has come up. So it's now interacting with some foundations. And once the foundation wall is immersed in water, gradually that water can come up. And yes, she's right. It spoils the paint. The paint will never stay on. Everywhere is damp. It could be the wall. It could even feel like that on the floor. Extremely uncomfortable, extremely... but there are solutions. There are chemicals. There are processes by which people can penetrate the wall with certain foam compounds, and that can now stop the water from... It's unfortunate to do it after the fact, because the best time to have made your building watertight was during construction. Right. But there are solutions, certainly, when necessary.
Obviously, that's something we're going to have to talk about.
Completely.
Maybe next week?
Perhaps. That's a good one.
All right. So, still talking World Architecture Day.
Right.
In Nigeria especially, how relevant would you say the commemoration of that day is for us as a people?
I think Nigeria is not unlike many other parts of the world where perhaps there isn't as much awareness about it. Again, when architects are working properly, you tend to find much more order in society, because an architect is very concerned not just with the actual building or structure or premises he's dealing with, but everything around it. So the access roads, the sidewalks, the landscape inside and outside, and other matters. But we have work to do. This must be stated clearly. We have a lot of work to do to get all those stakeholders I described earlier to work in closer synchrony when it comes to improving the built environment we collectively share. So yesterday, for instance, the River State chapter of the Nigerian Institute of Architects staged a combination of three things. For one, we did an early morning fitness walk where we had a few signs, we sang, we ran, we jogged and everything. We had some T-shirts on so that people would just have an idea and walk through one or two of the populated parts of the center of town, Rumola and the like. Then in the afternoon, we started with an exhibition of architects' works, electronic, and also some physical models, just to show people how the concepts develop right from a small model on your tabletop. Of course, the concept comes from somebody's brain, and then it's developed into a model, and that model is later transmitted into a real life human-sized project. It's a process, as I say, and that process involves very many people. For each line an architect draws, you could actually find up to 50 people are employed, because the lines represent processes, they represent products, they represent, places. You can put a line and it's a wall. That wall has blocks, it has cement, it has sand, it has masons, it has people who drove the trucks, it has also people, painters, aluminum workers, door makers, locks. There's so many pieces and parts that go into that line called a wall. And that line could be vertically something else. It's a material. So when architects are working properly, one, because of the training we have, and we'll talk a bit about that, you tend to find there's more order in the environment, because we think of the consequences of each line we put down. It's not just enough for us to just draw a plan and drop it there. No, it has to relate with everything around us. Context is very important. Then that context starts, let me go back a bit to when we're in school. When you come into architecture school, you've often at least been relatively successful in your entrance exams, because I make a joke that nobody gives anybody architecture. You actually have to aspire to it and earn it. I've heard of people who wanted to do this and they gave them that. Nobody ever gives you architecture. Right. You have to get it. You have to get in. And right from the early stages, you're taught the normal things, your physics and all those other material sciences. Then you are being moved towards the creative side. You must express your creative side. Your creative side is so important because almost every project has its unique challenges. And part of your work is to provide solutions to those challenges. Not every solution, I should add, is a building. But yes, we are the masters of the built environment. We, and I will never stop emphasizing, we and the other consultants. I didn't mention them. I did. Structural engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and the quantity surveyors. Those are the core group of people. You have landscape architects. you have the geotech and all that. You see, when they're all working together, it's for only one person, the client, either an individual or organization or maybe a government body. So the normal process is there could be an identified lack or need. Then you contact you may, you see, this happens in two ways. You might have a need and you can talk to an architect and say, this is the challenge. And he may give you guidance on what kind of land to get, where to get it to maximize your option. Or you could have the land first and say, I want this solution there. So with what you have, the architect can approach it using all the zoning codes, because not everything can be placed everywhere. There are zones where you have different things. We now liaise with the town planning authorities, know what's acceptable in terms of land use, height, everything about it, and then use the brief that we get out of the client. What is a brief, you might ask? A brief is when you interact with the client, you understand their needs, their broad financial prospects. You're not looking for anybody's bank balance. We're just, okay, this may be approximately XYZ. And so the person is now put on notice that it might cost this, so that they can say, okay, that sounds reasonable or not, and then we can modify. You get to the point where you have now articulated all that's needed. You now translate those written things into what people are familiar with: lines, drawings, plans. But those lines are always informed by so many other things I talked about. Where is this building? What method of building is going to be used? Who is building? Because there are some high-tech structures you see abroad that we may not yet be able to do here because we don't have the logistics chain to bring certain materials from where they are to where they'll be. So we have to use what we use around here, but we must still be creative. And then the building is first thing. We always think of keeping that building going. Notre Dame, that church that got burned in France, had existed for 1,400 years before, unfortunately, a modern fire took it out. That means you can maintain a building for that long.
Yeah.
When you see buildings here 20, 30 years, they're looking like a decrepit shell. There's something wrong. Maybe there was an absence of a maintenance plan. So even in interviewing those who would build the buildings, we're looking for those, one, who have the technical skills, and those who will add to us the dimension of maintenance over time, so that even when you finish the project, there's a maintenance plan. Every quarter, every year, certain elements should be touched, you should inspect, so that you don't have a collapse. We heard on the news how a jetty collapsed. There should be a regular maintenance plan or inspection, so that you are able to see what may be going wrong and avoid certain kinds of incidents like we heard on the news.
Now, what key role can individuals play? Because there's another comment here. I think I should just read it out now. Someone is asking, I have a plot of land in a waterlogged area. How do I make my building watertight during construction? So taking cue from that to also ask, what role can individuals play, like you and I, maybe not you now, but listener and I right now, who obviously want to buy property, want to build, and would obviously continue to maintain such property. What can we do?
Okay. Now, we don't know how he acquired that land. We also don't know when he acquired it. Maybe he got in the dry season and he discovered now it gets waterlogged.
Yeah.
Or he bought it when it was wet and he said, look, this is what I can afford now. I don't have an idea. But when you consider that bridges are built inside water, construction can go on in a waterlogged area. The question now becomes, what is the actual cost of that construction? Because when you're doing it for an infrastructure item, perhaps you can afford to expend, certain quantum of money. For an individual house or residential project, the proportion of what you might need to get your substructure stable versus the rest of the cost of the building might now look a bit lopsided. It's not impossible, because there are ways to do construction to dewater the place. You can create dikes. You are able to, create an area where you can work within. And then even the engineers at that point may now make a kind of concrete mix that doesn't need as much introduced water, because it's going to soak up. There are different things that the engineers, geniuses, are doing. Suffice it to say, you can construct in a waterlogged area. The question is always, at what cost relative to a non-waterlogged area. It's just going to be more complex, definitely more costly. But if you are able to, and this is where your consultants are indispensable, because we can give you a pretty fair idea of exactly what it would take, having looked at the site, looked at the access, because unlike in other places where you can drive a truck right up to the site and tip, maybe in this case you have to tip far away, then you have to take material, put into smaller containers and move it. That's like what happens when those of us who are from riverine areas, to construct there is so expensive, because in any non-riverine area you can drive a whole 30-ton truck of material and just dump it there. You have to take that 30 tons into something as small as a cement bag, and then move it wheelbarrow by wheelbarrow into a boat, and then you take it off the truck where they piled it into bags. You now move it in wheelbarrows to the water side. You have to pay for each movement. You move it from the water side into the boat. You move the boat to the new place. You pay to get it from the boat into the water side. Then you pay to take it from the water side to the site.
And then you have to do that a couple of times to get all your materials
For a project, it takes a lot of that. And so the cost of just conveying the material is part of the difficulty of being built. And so that's why when we had some nice conceived government projects where they wanted to have the same kind of school in every community, and they basically put the same budget and all, it was wrong and unfair, because the logistics of getting a particular project done in a certain place are going to be different when it's a waterlogged, a riverine area.
So there are some other questions here.
Sure.
Franco Confidence is asking, there are many buildings without approved plans which were supervised by an architect and engineer during the building, which would likely collapse in the near future. What role do architects or architecture play in prevention of such imminent building collapses? Also, does Society for Architecture synergize with the Ministry of Land and Housing?
I would make bold to say that there is not a single building that was built and had the involvement of a registered and licensed architect and engineer that was not approved. And I say that because as a licensed engineer and architect, you have something at stake. You can lose your license to practice if you engage in that kind of thing. And to go further to say, are likely to collapse, let me assure you, that is not going to happen. So maybe they have to look at those people and see whether just by saying they were actually really properly licensed. Okay. There is a role to play, of course, in relating with the land and survey and approval authorities. And that is where, when you work with a licensed professional, we have, one, the relationships, two, the confidence to engage with those authorities and ensure that both parties' needs are met. One, the need of the owner to have the building done. Two, the need of the authorities to ensure that they're doing their job. That is where your consultant professionals are your best ally in achieving your project.
All right, let's speak to John. I do hope he's still here. Oh dear, John, apologies. Please call back. We'd like to get your thoughts and your questions, if any. Well, on WhatsApp, there's a comment here. I don't know how to put it. I'm trying to rephrase. But this person is basically trying to say that people do not know that architects exist because you do not necessarily put yourselves out there. Right.
By the ethics of our practice, we are not necessarily allowed to advertise in the classic way, that other organizations can. The maximum you are permitted to do is a building sticker, maybe on your premises. We have our professional stickers, and also a sign that has a very limited size. You see, the profession of architecture is one where they attempt to promote as much as possible a meritocracy. And so they didn't want a situation where an architect who has, just because he has spent more time, has become more established, can literally drown the competition from other younger upcoming professionals. At the end of the day, the way you can get some of the best architecture is by commissioning competitions so that people can come forth and excel strictly on the strength of their ideas, not necessarily how long they've been at it. So we are not allowed to buy center page of one newspaper and say, architect Ambrose, come. No, we're not allowed to do that. But our work can speak for us. The time we can put ourselves there is on a project site. You can have a project signboard where, as the project is going on, your information and all the information of all the consultants is normally put on those project boards. So people passing by who see what they, who like what they see, can stop, inquire. At that point, they can get the identity of the architects and other consultants.
So there was a second part of Franco Confidence's comments. He was asking, do these architects synergize with the Ministry of Land and Housing?
Yes, I said it's a necessary part of what we do. We must go to them to understand the land use projections, what is intended. It's never possible or wise in any case to work in a silo as a professional. So you go there, you get very valuable information, and you now convert that information in addition to what your client needs into the final product of architecture.
All right. This comment here is from the person who talked about having a plot of land in the waterlogged area. The person said the area is Stadium Road, Port Harcourt.
Yeah, there are a few creeks around there. So that's not even such a bad thing, because Stadium Road is Stadium Road. After all, there is road in the name, meaning you can get at least relatively close. So I would imagine that such a project, there will be part of the project execution plan would be to create some form of access. Yes, I suspect it will be necessary to do some filling, but that filling can be indiscriminate. We are already experiencing situations where people just come and fill, and the next thing they're creating problems for their neighbors.
Yeah.
So that filling has to be done with studies. Land surveyors would know when you're filling, where is the water you're displacing going? Because you must be considerate of your neighbors. You just don't come and think you're an island. We all share this earth's surface, and so we must work wisely side by side with each other. But on or off Stadium Road, that cannot be a problem. When I think of waterlogged, I think of places like you go on a boat for 1 hour. That's water.
That is real.
That is off the. This is the mainland. Stadium Road, beautiful site. You have no problem, Mr. or Madam. You have no problem whatsoever.
Well, still talking about the costs, because again, that's one of the major things that differentiates a proper dry land to a waterlogged area.
Yes.
You would obviously spend more
for the
than
substructure. Correct.
In a situation where you do not have that much access to resources to do the necessary work required for a waterlogged area, are there alternatives?
To build in a waterlogged area, you have to make the resources available.
Wow.
You cannot afford to create a structure that will not meet your needs in the long term. It might mean that your development period might be longer. It might mean that the kind of structure you can build may not be all you wish you could do, but you can do something with it. Again, it's a matter of the proportion. Some more money might end up going in the substructure, that's the foundation, but at the end of the day, you can achieve something. Now, what you can achieve to maximally take advantage of that site, the person who can bring that out for you is your professional architect with the other consultants. And in that case, the need to work with your other consultants is paramount, because there are services and all that have to be provided around that project. Your mechanical engineer, where they're going to put the various services, the boreholes and all that, they're the masters of that. Your structural engineer will make the necessary mix of concrete and the method of placement to ensure that that structure is properly founded and will not shake or shiver. Then, of course, your electrical engineer, you don't want a house where you touch something, you put on a switch and somebody in the kitchen gets shocked. You want to make sure that that building is properly earthed and everything. So you can't risk anything. You need all your consultants. After the architect has, come up with the layout and possibilities, then all the other consultants work with him and for you to ensure that your product will give you the necessary result at the end of the day.
Now, how then can we take advantage, or rather, how can we as a state, River State, how can we take advantage of professionals such as the architects, engineers in your team to ensure that we have, better, long-lasting buildings?
You see, there was, and I would always advocate for this, there was something called the one-stop shop, where the professionals from the various institutes were embedded side by side with the people from the approving authorities. Now, they were there just primarily to take a look at the submissions coming in, ensure that they met with the minimum expected standards from a professional, so that not just anybody could just say they're doing drawings. And then they're not there to say this style of architecture. No, they're just there to ensure that the quality of the eventual product will be met. And in the process, they also were giving a huge amount of IGR, maybe 10 or 15 times the IGR to the state government. And you know, in this world where we're fighting VAT and all that, anything a state can do to improve its IGR should be approached and embraced. So the way to ensure that better buildings are conceived and built is to ensure that the professionals are embedded once again in that what you call a one-stop shop. So a set of drawings is submitted, architecture, mechanical, electrical, and structural, and the various professionals each take their section and look at it, what codes are being respected, what methodology is intended, and all that. And each of them goes over their section, and it's when they've done that that set of drawings can be deemed fit for purpose, fit for use in the field. Anything that's missing, they simply communicate with the professionals. Okay, there's this line, have you done this, have you thought of this? Again, it's not an editorial, it's not a design review, it's a standards review. And the most important thing, in my view, is that it brings money to the state.
Amazing. So there's a question here. It's another question from the first comment earlier. It says, another question, people are scared of architects because of the cost of consultation. Is there a cheaper way?
I love that question, because one of the things that we did say yesterday, and I want to put it out here, architects have they're one of the best bets you can use. I've told you, Gabby, that your project is likely to be the single most expensive thing you will ever spend money on in your life. It's likely to be. So isn't it therefore more important to do what you call your risk management? So you think, oh, the architect may cost much. But let me give you what some people have guessed, have theorized about. If you have 10 naira to spend on your building and you're not using professionals, you're running a very high risk. The possibility is that out of that your 10 naira, between 4 naira and 5 naira may end up actually working for you on that project. So you're missing as much as 5 or 6 naira, but you're spending that 10 naira nonetheless. I will tell this listener, God bless them, that all your consultants together, all of these names I called, may not cost you more than 1 naira 50 kobo. Let's say 15%. Normally actually 14.4. I'm rounding it up. 15%. And because you have them in tow, you are able to ensure that your money, that your 10 naira, you will spend 8 naira 50 kobo. So you have spent your 10 naira anyway, but you're doing 30% better in terms of where the money goes. Let me give you a simple example. In some of the remote villages, you have that man who's the builder of the town just say, put pillar here, put pillar here, put pillar here. And guess what? When he builds a building, it stands. I'm not saying it doesn't stand, but when you use a structural engineer, the structural engineer will actually study the forces that affect that building, and they will optimize the use of the columns. It's a column, not a pillar, by the way. So they will optimize. Right. So what you do is that they will now ensure that where you do have a column, they will put the proper amount of reinforcement. They will not over reinforce, and they can separate those columns properly so you can achieve better quality of space inside. Now, the person who just said put pillar here, put pillar, you will still have a building that's standing, but it's not optimized. So this is the kind of thing I'm saying, where instead of getting 4 to 5 naira out of your 10 naira, you're getting 8 naira 50 kobo, and you're getting a much better design. So architects are able, we are available, and we are affordable. Affordable doesn't mean cheap. It means getting value for money.
True.
Gabby, there's a meal you'll eat for 200 naira that will annoy you.
True.
And there's another place you go to, you eat a meal for 3,600 naira, and you will be happy because it hit the spot.
Yeah.
That's almost how architecture is, and the other consultants. We work as a team, so we're never alone. You know, architects never work alone. We work with other people. We will ensure that your money, you get what they call bang for the buck. You maximize the value of the money.
Right.
And so you're not actually, think of it like this: architects are not an expense, they're actually an investment
Wow.
in your project now and in the future, so that you can leave that project to other people and it will have the maximum utility. So
Right.
if you look at it that way, you don't see it anymore as an expense and, you know, they're expensive. No, they're your best investment in the built environment.
Amazing way to put that. Well, this comment here says, "Good afternoon, architect Bozimo. In the fashion world, there are designers that can only make children wears and cannot make adult wears because it's not their specialty. Now in the architectural world, can every architect build a house? Can someone who knows how to build a fuel filling station also build a house?"
Definitely, there are specializations also in architecture. Fundamentally, I'll say a residential building is everybody's bread and butter as an architect. Let's just put that out there. But you find that some people have an interest or a leaning towards certain kinds of buildings. There are some architects who they would have all the standards for a school building at their fingertips. Others would be able to do the petrol station kind of thing because that's DPR, underground tanks. There's a whole different set of things. But all the architects will always do is ensure that the vehicles and the functionality of the people using those structures are able to use them safely. Because safety is our number one priority. The fact that you are in that building, you should be safe while using it, while outside it, and forever. So anytime, like that earlier caller or commenter said, buildings are about to collapse, I would argue with confidence that licensed professionals are not on a job like that, for the simple reason that we have something to lose. I do not want, and none of my colleagues wants to lose their license to practice architecture. One, because we love it. Two, because it's a means for our income. So we would always uphold the highest ethics. There are situations where an architect, maybe somebody's trying to make you do something wrong. An architect who's licensed, who has something that they will say, I will not do it, and will write a letter to that effect, write it to the owner, make sure it's delivered by signpost, and write to the authorities and withdraw from the job. It's not every job that I must do, but any job I do must be done very well.
Amazing. This will be our final comment because we're out of time. To carry out my building project, what are the major professionals I would need? And someone is also asking for your contact details. I guess you'd share your social handles with us
At the end, yeah.
Right. So the question is, to carry out my building project, what are the major professionals I would need?
It depends on the kind of building you intend, but you would need your architect. If you want to make sure you don't leave any things to chance, you would need all your professionals: your architect, your structural engineer, especially once the building is going up more than one level, your mechanical and your electrical engineers. Don't even think that those people are superfluous, because there's nothing worse than a building, even no matter how modest it is, that has built-in failures. You see, not every building failure is a collapse. A building where functionality is bad is a failure that you're living with on every day. You have no idea what effect it has on your health care and your sense of well-being. You enter the house, when you turn on the tap in the kitchen, the one in the bathroom goes slim. That, I know you can live with it. It takes you a few minutes longer to fill your bucket. But why should you live with that? When you turn on the AC in the bedroom, the TV trips off in the bathroom, in the bedroom, in the parlor. Those are things we all then, okay, you get a stabilizer. But why should you need to do that? Again, the house is functional, but with your proper professionals, everything is optimized and you're able to live as you deserve to live, like a sane human being on the surface of planet Earth. That way Nigeria doesn't give us any reason to live less, to a lower standard than anybody else in the world.
I know that a lot of people still have lots of questions. There's some questions that just came in now, but we cannot take them. So let's have your social media handle for people who would like to reach you.
As long as those our apps are working, I can be reached at AB Bozimo on all those major platforms at AB Bozimo.
All right.
I love hearing from the listeners.
Facebook.
Instagram, Facebook, and which other
Them
one?
all.
The other ones that must not be named right now.
Thank you so much.
Yes, at AB Bozimo. I love to hear from the listeners, and I learn a lot from them as well. Thank you so much, Gabriella.
Thank you
God
so
bless
much for
you.
joining me on the show. I look forward to next Tuesday already.
Yeah, we have a topic somebody has given us already. Fantastic.
Thank you so much. Well, 3 o'clock happens in 5 minutes. Rivers today, right after that, will take you on Hard Facts. It's been a swell time with you on the show today. Let's do this again tomorrow, right after the major news at 12. I'm Gabriella. Have a splendid afternoon.